The Battle of Anholt occurred during the Gunboat War, a war between the United Kingdom and Denmark-Norway. It was an attempt by the Danes to recapture Anholt, a small Danish island off the coast of Jutland, which the British had captured in 1809. The Danish army had a larger fighting force than the British, but a lack of planning and supply failures led to a devastating defeat and many Danish casualties. The battle proved a decisive British victory, with the result that the British occupation of Anholt continued until the peace treaty in 1814. There is a monument commemorating the battle in Anholt village. Strategic background to the battle. Early in the Gunboat War, the Danes had closed their lighthouse at the easternmost point of Anholt. In January 1809, the bomb vessel Proselyte, which the British had stationed off Anholt to act as a lighthouse, struck Anholt Reef and sank. On the 18th of May 1809, the 74-gun third-rate HMS Standard, under Captain Askew Hollis, led an escadron that also included the frigate Owen Glendower, Avenger, Ranger, Rose and Snipe. Together they captured the island. A landing party of seamen and marines under the command of Captain William Selby of Owen Glendower, with the assistance of Captain Edward Nichols of the Standard's Marines, landed. The Danish garrison of 170 men put up a sharp but ineffectual resistance that killed 1 British Marine and wounded 2. The garrison then surrendered. The British took immediate possession of the island. Hollis, in his report, stated that Anholt was important in that it could furnish supplies of water to His Majesty's fleet, and afford a good anchorage to merchant vessels sailing to and from the Baltic. However, the principal objective of the mission was to restore the lighthouse on the island to its pre-war state to facilitate the movement of British men of war and merchantmen navigating the dangerous seas there. King Frederick VI of Denmark declared the recovery of Anholt to be the highest priority and gave orders in February 1810 for the collection of the necessary troops and gunboats, under the overall command of General Telequist. Winter ice and late storms hampered the expedition, which set sail 3 times from Gjerrild Bay, just north of Grena, without reaching Anholt. Eventually, when British warships started to be seen, the window of opportunity had disappeared and General Telequist gave the order to abandon the expedition for that year. Captain Nichols, of the Royal Marines, the British governor on the island, had heard of the plans to recapture Anholt and deployed a gunboat, the Grinder, to scout the coast of Jutland whenever the weather was fair. Grinder also captured some small merchant vessels, but on the 13th of April 1810 4 Danish gunboats captured her. In August 1810 Anholt became a stone frigate, and was notionally classified as a 50-gun ship. Although the island garrison consisted of Royal Marines, it was a ship in the eyes of the Admiralty, and the officer commanding the Marines, Captain Torrens of the Royal Marines, was ultimately accountable to Captain Morris of the Royal Navy, the British governor on the island. This arrangement reflected the inequality of status between Royal Navy officers and Royal Marine counterparts. Battle. At the beginning of March 1811, Vice Admiral Sir James Saumarez received information that the Danes would attack Anholt. Tartar sailed from Yarmouth on the 20th of March and anchored off the north end of the island on the 26th of March. On the 24th of March, a Danish fleet of 18 gunboats with 1,000 Danish Marines on board left Gjerrild Beach in Jutland. The Danish fleet was unaware that frigates were on the way to protect the British base on Anholt, known as Fort York, and had been reinforced with artillery. The Danes landed some 1,000 troops in the darkness and fog and attempted to outflank the British positions. The Danes landed on the northern beach of Anholt early in the morning and marched towards Fort York, a bastion-built-in extension of the lighthouse and now manned by 380 British Marines. On the 27th of March the garrison sighted the enemy off the south side of the island. Morris marched to meet them with a battery of howitzers and 200 infantry, and signalled Tartar and Sheldrake. The two vessels immediately made every endeavour to beat south, but the shoals forced him to stand so far out that it took them many hours. There was a failure to coordinate any Danish plan of battle, and the fighting ended in sporadic encounters. The Danish soldiers, without supplies, became thirsty and tired. The batteries at Fort York and Masserine stopped the assault. The Danes launched a final attack on Fort York at 10 in the evening, led by Major Melsted. With raised sword he led a charge by a small party of men towards the fort, but a British bullet ended his life and settled the battle. The Danish attempts to take Fort York failed due to a combination of poor planning, a lack of provisions and a failure to bring field artillery, much of this due to the current limitations on Danish shipping following British naval successes. Ultimately, this proved fatal. Gunfire from Tartar and Sheldrake forced the gunboats to move off westwards. The gunboats made their escape over the reefs while the ships had to beat round the outside. Tartar chased 3 gunboats towards Laso but found herself in shoal water as night approached and gave up the chase. On the way back, Tartar captured 2 Danish transports that it had passed while chasing the gunboats. One of them had 22 soldiers on board, with a considerable quantity of ammunition, shells and the like, while the other contained provisions. Sheldrake managed to capture 2 gunboats. The Danes on the western side managed to embark on board 14 gunboats and make their escape. The battle cost the British only 2 killed and 30 wounded. The Danes lost their commander, 3 other officers, and 50 men killed. The British took, besides the wounded, 5 captains, 9 lieutenants, and 504 rank and file as prisoners, as well as 3 pieces of artillery, 500 muskets, and 6,000 rounds of ammunition. In addition, Sheldrake's 2 captured gunboats resulted in another 2 lieutenants of the Danish Navy, and 119 men falling prisoner. Captain Joseph Baker of Tartar proposed taking his Danish prisoners to Randers and exchanging them for the officers and crew of Pandora, which had wrecked in February. Consequences. As a result of the Battle for Anholt, the Royal Marines won many supporters among senior naval officers, which helped to further their cause for fairness in terms of service and officers' promotion. It was customary for senior officers to be presented with ceremonial swords to commemorate significant victories, as well as Captain Morris receiving a sword. Captain Torrens received 2 swords, one from his brother officers, and another from the non-commissioned officers and privates. This latter sword was purchased by the Royal Marines Museum on the 200th anniversary of the Battle of Anholt, and all 3 are on display at the Royal Marines Museum. In 1847, the Royal Navy authorized the issuance of the Naval General Service Medal with the Bar Anholt the 27th of March 1811, to reward this action. 40 men claimed this bar, mainly Royal Marines. 200 years later, in March 2011, Danish and British naval authorities attended the inauguration on the island of a new memorial to those who lost their lives in the battle.